What was our fantasy football reaction to the big performances of Christmas weekend, including Amari Cooper, Breece Hall, Puka Nakua? And what about the disappointment we got again from the Chiefs? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we begin another week and another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Hope you all had a very good Christmas weekend, especially good if your fantasy football teams came through, whether you're playing DFS, of course, your seasonal leagues. A lot of you were playing in your semifinal round, so hopefully all those things worked out. You were on the right side of some of the performances, including Amari Cooper blowing off, Breece Hall going nuts, all kinds of good stuff to talk about, some bad stuff to talk about as well. We'll have some reactions to that here as we begin a Tuesday show and do the transition to Week 17. Before we do that, I got to tell you that this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
Well, Michelle, I felt really good about the team that I liked all season long. They came through. They're very balanced, and now I'm in a championship game, and I kind of didn't have to sweat it out. I told you about Puka Nakua and Chris Olave. I just saw the points pile up, and look, my opponent was counting on Deebo Samuel and Isaiah Likely to come through, and didn't happen there on Monday night. So I'm feeling good, but we know that some of us are feeling bad. Some of us are feeling good. How did your teams fare, and are you just feeling sick about either benching a guy or facing someone that was just amazing?
So I didn't have to face Amari Cooper, so that was good. But I did have Brock Purdy. So if that tells you anything. So let's just jump right into that game last night because you get the Ravens versus the 49ers. Brock Purdy's at home. You expect him to put up a good game because he always does at home. But instead, he has 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and then kind of gets banged up at the end of the game when they're already down by a lot. So they put in Sam Darnold. But Lamar Jackson does this thing, right? So against a tough 49ers defense on the road, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense looks fantastic. Well, they just completely shut down the 49ers offense. I'll say the 49ers get the Commanders next week. So if you somehow made it through with Brock Purdy in your lineups, I'm not worried about him next week. But I'm excited to see the Ravens and Dolphins next week.
Yeah, I mean, look at what happened in the game. Trent Williams goes out. I don't know what happens. Like, as soon as Trent Williams goes out, the entire 49ers offense was looking around. They also had more offensive line injuries. They became a turnstile. It was just like keeping guys out of the backfield was very difficult. And when Brock Purdy's under siege, I know he threw a couple balls that were tipped there that did not end up in his favor. It was brutal. They just couldn't have time to execute the offense that they would like, sitting in the pocket, throwing downfield, getting those big plays, even when trying to get rid of the ball quickly. So credit to the Ravens defense. They played an outstanding game. They were kind of ready for it. And Brock Purdy, maybe the moment was a little bit big, right? This is his biggest game, arguably, that's non-playoffs, and he was the MVP favorite, so maybe some pressure, pressing a little bit with some of the throws he made. But look, if he plays through that stinger here in Washington, it's going to be a good deal no matter what. We know how bad the Commanders' pass defense is, and we saw the Jets woke up against that offense or that defense completely. So something to look at. But Michelle, what I like about the Lamar matchup is he's playing his hometown team. There's the number 1 seed on the line against the Dolphins. So I would expect a little bit more of the same, even though the Dolphins defense is playing pretty well and they shut down the Cowboys. I do really like Lamar to keep it up next week. And look, this is an offense that we're not maybe giving as much credit for because it can be a bit up and down, but they have adjusted well, found different guys, and now I think Lamar's locked in again.
Yeah, and that defense, I was underrating them, honestly, because they came to play. I don't think they played like this all year long. I know they have really good stats. They didn't look as dominant all year long as they looked last night. They were just all over the place, making huge tackles. So that Ravens defense, now they'll have a lot on their hand next week against Tyreek Hill. It seems like Jalen Waddle might miss time, but yeah, it might be a hard game for Tua. But let's jump to that Browns game now, because if you had Amari Cooper, you won, right? I mean, if you lost with Amari Cooper in your lineup, the rest of your guys must have really, really failed you. But Amari Cooper puts up like what, over 50 fantasy points if you're in full PPR. Absolutely insane against the Texans. Joe Flacco has another great fantasy day. The Texans, on the other hand, do pretty much absolutely nothing on offense. They really were missing CJ Stroud. Davis Mills, did all right. Case Keenum was absolutely terrible. But okay, listen to me here though. So you just win your championship, your semifinals. Oh my goodness, let me get that right. With Joe Flacco and Amari Cooper. Next week though, in your championship, they'll be facing the Jets. Is there any part of you that's able to play Joe Flacco against that Jets secondary? Of course, Amari Cooper is going to be in your lineup.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, Michelle, because Joe Flacco wasn't a good fantasy quarterback for the Ravens ever. He had one good run, and that was in the playoffs, so it didn't even count for us too much, where he would put up big numbers after big numbers. But this 303 touchdown stretch is unheard of, and go figure, it's for the Browns, who have a beat-up offensive line, who don't have a lot in the running game to help, but just Amari Cooper and David Njoku going nuts. Basically, two guys doing this here for Joe Flacco. I don't know. This is a really tough matchup. I think on one hand, you say it's a revenge game for Joe Flacco. Why did they cast him off? You wonder what would have happened if the Jets had just kept him behind Aaron Rodgers. Would they be in their predicament given the way he's played? We will never know that. But when you look at it, it's just a tough matchup, period, right? I mean, we've known this. Every time you face the Jets, it's really hard to throw them. What I do like, however, and maybe being underrated, is that maybe it's a chance for Jerome Ford to get going in the running game, right? The Jets still give it up on the ground. We saw what Chris Rodriguez Jr. did to them, just starting out of nowhere in a key role with Antonio Gibson. So, look, you can run on that team. So maybe a little bit of a pivot. I'm not going to sit Amari Cooper. There's no way you do that. Of course, you can sit Joe Flacco. There's got to be an option. He was available in most leagues last week. And look, I don't think this performance says I'm going to scream and to say go out and get him, especially with what's coming up next. I'm always looking at what's next. And no. So fade Flacco for sure, but at this rate, you cannot sit Cooper.
And I will say, one quarterback that probably is not on many championship teams, right? Because you had to select him early. And he has been a massive disappointment over the second half of the season, is Patrick Mahomes. And you expected him to get going on Christmas Day against the Raiders. And man, it was another brutal performance from this Chiefs offense. Let's say somehow you're in the championship and you've been starting Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he gets two nice matchups, right? Against the Bengals and the Chargers. So next week in your fantasy championship would be against the Bengals. Like, does this Chiefs offense ever get going before they hit the playoffs this year?
Yeah, maybe they shouldn't have gotten rid of some of these guys that were role players, but they had some trust, right? I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster, Demarcus Robinson is playing really well now for the Rams. Maybe they should have kept these guys around, that there's some trust level with Patrick Mahomes, right? That's been extremely difficult to establish. And I think essentially these injuries to Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney are like part banishments, right? Get out of here to streamline things. Now, I don't know why it took him this long to realize that Richie James, he's been pretty good for the 49ers and Giants when they've called upon to do something for him, that use him a little bit more. I don't get it. Like, this is a smart team and know the skill sets of all these players. Why aren't they figuring it out? Like, they force things up to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, which is a waste of time. Justin Watson is okay once in a while when he's wide open, but use two tight end sets. They had a little short screen game going to Travis Kelce, and then they just totally forgot about it in the second half. And this Raiders defense is good. I get it. Antonio Pierce has been really a good influence, but this should never happen. I mean, the Chiefs were also just stopping the Raiders from doing anything offensively. So this was very embarrassing all around, reality, fantasy. That said, they do get the Bengals this week, and that would seem to be a good matchup for them. Unfortunately, they lost Isaiah Pacheco, but you can run on the Bengals, so that could be good for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? Jerick McKinnon's on IR. You also have Travis Kelce in a great tight end matchup against a team that represents where he went to college, so maybe he'll be ready finally and blow up in that game. So if you survive there, there's a little bit of hope, because also we know that Bengals defense started to give us some big plays in the passing game too, right, to the Steelers. So maybe some potential here and hope if you survive somehow with Mahomes and or Kelsey. Like, you should be out if you have those guys. Luckily, I had Kelsey, but I had all those other people, and it didn't really matter. But unless you benched Mahomes, like you judiciously played him in the right matchups, and you avoided this one, you're probably dead. So I don't know what to say except I think he is an argument for one of the biggest busts of the season.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he hasn't even been a top 8 quarterback any game in the second half of the season. And the last 5 weeks or 4 weeks has been quarterback 16, 19, 17, 17. Like the biggest, most important stretch of the fantasy season. He's completely let people down. But like you brought up against the Bengals, I mean, we're going to be talking about the Steelers game in the next minute. And Mason Rudolph can put up nearly 300 passing yards and a couple touchdowns on the Bengals. There's no reason that Patrick Mahomes cannot.
Yeah, it's weird, and this is what's driving us insane as fantasy managers too, right? Joe Flacco was not even in the league when we started out, and he's a QB1 in fantasy football playoffs. I mean, you're looking at Nick Mullins putting up decent numbers, even with 4 interceptions. You're looking at Mason Rudolph throwing a couple bombs. You're looking at Bryce Young having a big fantasy game. This tells you don't draft a quarterback early. This is all that's telling you. So maybe we change that strategy again next year. But yeah, I mean, the streaming game, if you stream quarterbacks all season long, you're ending up winning for sure this season. That was the way to go on 100%. Now we'll get into some other storylines there, including Mason Rudolph and what we expect from them against Seattle to follow up that. If Rudolph is going to get another start, we'll do that in our next segment and look at some other offenses that also did well. But before we did that, we got to hear from another one of our fine sponsors. All right, this is a great time of year. We're transitioning at the end of the year, so you want to get in there. We have a couple more weeks left in the regular season. The weather gets colder all around. The NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins, so you can just look at that. Maybe you like the Thursday night game and you just think the Browns are going to take care of business against the Jets. Well, you're set up, right? Then you get that $150 there with that winning money line bet. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the final 2 weeks of the NFL season in style here. Get on the action on Thursday night. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Michelle, let's get into your team that came through. Go figure, Mason Rudolph wakes up the Steelers offense. George Pickens pretty much benched in most leagues across America. He was doing nothing, comes through with 2 massive plays. Look, Mason Rudolph is a gunslinger, and this is why he was probably buried on the depth chart, where he's just going to chuck it up and keep throwing and throwing. He's very Nick Mullins-esque, right? Whatever happens, happens. He doesn't care. So that said, looking at the Seahawks, who are a tough defense on the road, looks like mysteriously Kenny Pickett's injury is lingering another week here. So it looks like Rudolph is going to start. And what else do you expect from him on Christmas, though? I mean, the name was perfect. He came through. But do you want to start him in fantasy when no one did in that matchup?
No, you don't want to start him in fantasy, but I do think it gives hope for the other guys, right? I know Deontay Johnson didn't do much of anything, 5 targets, 2 receptions, 15 yards. Everything went to George Pickens, but it gives you hope for both Pickens and Deontay Johnson. It also, I think, made it easier for Najee Harris to, get those carries because they're actually, and he got the touchdown because they're actually scoring, right? And he could have got another one, but Calvin Austin got the rushing touchdown, but they were down there. So I think this offers more opportunities for Najee Harris. We know that George Pickens can have huge plays with Mason Rudolph. And this is the thing with Rudolph. Yeah, he might be a little bit more dangerous, but at least you have an opportunity for touchdowns. So Mason Rudolph has more passing touchdowns in career starts than Kenny Pickett does, despite starting 13 fewer games than him. So Rudolph has 15 career passing touchdowns in 11 starts. Pickett has 13 career passing touchdowns in 24 starts. Rudolph, in his very first start this year, had more passing yards than any Steelers quarterback had in a game this season. And of course, they scored a season high 34 points, by far. They hadn't scored more than 27 or 28 points in any game this season. So at least Rudolph gives them hope. And I think that's why Kenny Pickett's injury is lingering there. And I hope they stick with Rudolph. But let's talk about another gunslinger, Baker Mayfield. He is doing his thing with the Buccaneers and, just targeting Mike Evans. And Mike Evans is coming through with those touchdowns, getting Chris Godwin more targets. But, is Baker Mayfield going to stick around in this league as a starter, and will it be with the Buccaneers? But, do you just keep sticking with them too in your fantasy championships? He gets the Saints next week.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield, this is the biggest plot twist of the season, is that Baker Mayfield was an upgraded quarterback over what we saw from Tom Brady last year. And what happened? Mike Evans, we were down on him. Chris Godwin was okay, right? I mean, Mike Evans has been this guy all season long. I mean, Godwin had the blow-up game last week and borderline wide receiver 3. But Mike Evans, we didn't expect to finish old school Mike Evans, right in the top 10 there easily with his big plays and scoring. He had a quiet week in week 15, but when it's a good matchup like this on the outside and Baker can just let it chuck to him often, then you feel really good. So this has been great, and you want him around, and maybe this is it. We have to be a little bit buyer beware, right? Dave Canales had his influence on Geno Smith last year. We went into the following year with Geno Smith. It hasn't been that great, right? So maybe we look at the body of work previously where he struggled and you factor that in. But Baker's even struggled this year, even in training camp, right? Going back, he had to battle Kyle Trask. But I think this offense is perfect for him, and you're not paying him a ton of money. You don't have a great draft pick here, right? If you're going to win the NFC South, you're not going to go after franchise QB. So I think Baker's going to be back, and he'll be intriguing next year. But again, just buyer beware a little bit with the Geno Smith situation. But as far as this week against the Saints, I mean, the Saints' pass defense has looked atrocious. I mean, usually it was a strength, but man, I'm not scared at all. I mean, there's no nemesis, right? For Mike Evans, Marshawn Lattimore is not out there. That's the guy that always shuts him down. He's not there. So I do love this. And DFS, I want a lot of Mayfield and Evans this week as well.
Yeah. So, I am a little bit worried about Lattimore, always shutting down Evans.
Yeah.
That's a little bit scary. And if Evans is shut down, Mayfield probably won't have a huge game. But Mayfield has 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions over the last 3 weeks. The Buccaneers are averaging 31 points per game over that span. It is interesting, right? Because the Saints and the Buccaneers are fighting for the top spot in the NFC South. And Derek Carr gets paid, 4 years, $150 million contract, while Baker got paid 1 year, $4 million. And Baker has been the better quarterback across the board in pretty much all metrics this year. And his team's the one in first. So just interesting little plot line there. And I just love to hate on Derek Carr. So that's just an extra little bonus
I
for
do
me.
too now. I'm feeling it, and I'm just done with it. So.
I'm sick of watching him. Another team I'm sick of watching is the Jets, right? They haven't been fun this year at all because of the quarterback situation. But Breece Hall goes absolutely ballistic, right? In the semifinals for you or whatever round you're in your playoffs. RB1, that's fantastic because last week he was RB60 and destroyed you. But if you made it through and got to play him this week, he really came through. He's been all over the place this year. I mean, so many terrible finishes, but then also 4 finishes inside the top 5 this season. Are we more confident that he could be more consistent next year, especially if the quarterback situation is handled with the Jets?
It took the Jets way too long to realize that Breece Hall needs to be an automatic 20-touch back, right? This Dalvin Cook business early was already bad, right? They tried to force him in there, and Dalvin Cook is cooked. And so don't waste your time. I thought Israel Abanikanda was a good enough back to put in as the number 2, and we saw this. This is what I thought that we'd see out of the Jets all season long, and I thought this would be even a bigger factor when Aaron Rodgers went down, right? We'd feed Breece Hall. He's our best playmaker that isn't Garrett Wilson. So, I blame Nathaniel Hackett for this. I don't think there's going to be a change, unfortunately. But here's a question for you. Is Breece Hall, given how good of a receiver he is, how explosive he can be, is he kind of maybe a Rachaad White type for you next year should Rodgers return? Are you feeling it in the first round with Breece Hall, given he's now an RB1 in average scoring?
I don't know about the first round. And luckily, because he was so inconsistent, I don't know if he'll go there unless the hype, keeps going. I will feel much better that normally running backs struggle their first year coming back from the ACL, and then they're back to normal in the second year. So that will be good. I just worry, will Aaron Rodgers make it through the year? The Jets have not had a stable quarterback situation or stable offense a really long time. So that worries me just because of the Jets offense. I believe in Breece Hall's talent. And I don't know if I believe in the coaching, and I don't know if I believe in the quarterback situation. So that's my worries. I'd probably not take him in the first round next year.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, you have to consider all those factors. It's a long off season. There could be some things that change with the offensive line or something where we figured out. But yeah, it's just surprising to me. And look, it's hard, right? Between those guys, would you rather have a guy that has some spike weeks and carries their team and disappears some weeks, or would you rather have the consistent guy that has a nice floor, has occasional, not maybe super ceilings, but okay? I feel like the latter is much better, right? Because you have consistency wire to wire. Your team isn't struggling one point of the season or another. It all comes together. And I think consistency is really important. So hopefully Breece Hall can be more consistent next year.
Yeah, absolutely. To end our show in our next segment, we're going to talk about how maybe Sam Howell and Tommy DeVito are donezo, at least for this year, right? And then Justin Fields, he put together a nice game for you in the playoffs, especially on the ground, is what we were hoping for as well. Before we get into all of that, let's talk about another one of our great sponsors. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have. It's the fastest-growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, just create an account on the Game Time app, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Vinny, it was fun for Sam Howell for the first half of the season. He's dying off, right? Really hard matchup against the Jets. He gets benched because he's not doing anything, and then Jacoby Brissett comes in and just throws it all over the place again, right? They probably should have stuck with Jacoby Brissett going into this game after how well he did at the end of Week 15. But now it feels like they really just got to go with Jacoby Brissett, and who knows what happens to Sam Howell this offseason. And then Tommy DeVito, I think his chances in the NFL, I think they came and gone, right? He had his 15 minutes of fame. We'll see what they do with Daniel Jones / Tyrod Taylor in the offseason. But what are your feelings about these two teams in the way they're going to go? Will they search for a new quarterback this offseason?
Absolutely. I mean, the Commanders, I think you can't argue against the fact that they got a good sample size of Sam Howell. They essentially let him start the whole season. They've seen what they've seen. If they don't like it by now, then they got to move on, right? Look, if they didn't invest a high draft pick on him, they took a shot. I think that's a good way to approach it, right? What is Jacoby Brissett going to do? He's kind of a bridge guy. He's good to have on your roster and in the quarterback room. And look, he's probably good for fantasy. Unfortunately, they're playing the 49ers this week, so I don't know if I would go anywhere near there. 49ers defense is going to be a little bit mad. I don't love it this week, right? But the future, I think you have to see a quarterback change. The Giants are a little bit more interesting because we know it was Tommy DeVito only because Daniel Jones went on the shelf and Tyrod Taylor got hurt at the same time. So they gave Tommy DeVito a little long look to see if they're not totally sold on Daniel Jones with Tommy DeVito potentially be an option. No, he's not. So Tyrod Taylor comes in. What I like about him and Jacoby Brissett, they're very similar, right? They move around. They have strong arms. They play in a variety of offenses. They're comfortable throwing to number one guys on the outside. So I like their blend of talent here. Tyrod might have a little bit more value this week because they are playing the Rams. The Rams give up some numbers downfield, and he's a good downfield thrower. We saw that with the touchdown to Darius Slayton. So short term, if you're looking for someone and you're desperate, and Michelle, I could be that person. I started Nick Mullins last week. I might look at Tyrod this week just because the matchup is so good against the Rams. It's at home. And for next year, I don't know. I think they're going to have to commit to Daniel Jones. I mean, they spent so much money. They're going to be kind of a mediocre team, so they're not going to have a high draft pick. So I'm not feeling great, though, however, with the future of Daniel Jones, unless they got to get some more weapons there. Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, these guys are okay, but go get some better weapons. And Darren Waller may be on his last legs.
Yeah, they need a true wide receiver one for whatever quarterback is playing next year. You would, I mean, they paid Daniel Jones. You would expect him to be back after the injury-filled season. And yeah, I fully expect the Commanders to go out and at the very least give someone to compete against Sam Howell. But I expect Ron Rivera to be gone. Maybe Eric Bieniemy becomes the head coach, and he'll probably get to pick his next guy. Justin Fields, though, on the other hand, I think this is a little bit tougher of a conversation to have about where the Bears will go with quarterback next season, right? Fields is coming through. He's looking all right. I mean, he looks he's inconsistent. I'll say that, right? And the big thing is the Bears should have a way better record. I mean, Justin Fields is putting them in position to win. They've had 10+ point leads going into the fourth quarter. And each of the last 3 losses that Justin Fields started and finished, right? In the last 3 losses with him, they've had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter and ended up blowing it just as a team. I think a lot of that has to do with coaches, maybe Fields making some mistakes as well. But the Bears have the Panthers draft pick. And that to me means that the Panthers are going to have the first or second pick in the draft. The Bears probably let Justin Fields either trade him, right, and then take a quarterback early on.
Yeah, I can see it going either way. Maybe it's a situation where they try to get another team like the Panthers to make a ridiculous trade with them, get some more help, whether it's an offensive tackle or another wide receiver or another weapon, and use that draft capital, because I think they really did some good stuff here late in the season, part of it defensively, right? I mean, that was a good trade for Montez Sweat. They were terrible defensively early in the season, and now everything's short up. Ever since Matt Eberflus took over, they've had a pass rush. Their corners have been healthy. Their linebackers have started to play like their investment. You've seen some very good play from the Bears defense. So we'll see. I think they don't have to invest in much there now, so it probably is a focus on offense. So they go get Marvin Harrison Jr. sit there. Is he the best overall player in the draft? And just say, look, we're going to take him, run with him and DJ Moore and Justin Fields, and we'll have a special offense, and we actually might contend next year with his defense. So there's a lot of things for them to think about here, but I think Fields, it could definitely go either way. They could see him as an asset, say like the Falcons, right, want to trade for him. You get to play the Falcons this week, so they get a good look if they want to deal for him. So maybe there's something to look at there. But yeah, I've been impressed with Justin Fields down the stretch. And I think he's finished just about where we thought, right, in fantasy, in the middle of the pack, in the QB1 realm. So in terms of fantasy, he's doing what we wanted. He just maybe didn't come together as quickly as we wanted to and as consistently as we wanted to.
Yeah, and I think even for if you play in dynasty fantasy leagues, I do believe Justin Fields will be starting somewhere next year. There's like the quarterback situation in the NFL right now is just not very good, right? So Fields will be starting somewhere. I just don't know if it'll be with the Bears. But I'm really looking forward to having all of these quarterback conversations with you once we get into the offseason more, to get into just this week, in case you need some more help for the fantasy playoffs here to win your championship. There were some injuries that we're going to have to deal with going into this week. So Trevor Lawrence hurts his shoulder. Who knows if he plays? I mean, it's been up and down with him every week, right? Wondering if he's going to play. So we might actually see Beathard this week. It's been bad for the Jaguars overall, but Calvin Ridley and Evan Ingram came through for you this week. Jalen Waddle has an ankle sprain. TJ Hawkinson hurts his knee. Jordan Addison also ankle injury. Isaiah Pacheco concussion. And then the Brock Purdy stinger. I do think Purdy will be fine, though, for next week. But these are some pretty serious injuries you'll have to deal with going into this last week of the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one was watching Trevor Lawrence. Like, how many things have tried to get him out of the lineup, right? And he still keeps playing every single week. Is this the one that knocks him out? Unfortunately, I think Hawkinson is going to be shut down. Jalen Waddle has a high ankle sprain, so maybe some opportunities there. I think the biggest opportunity for the Vikings comes from KJ Osborne, right? With Addison a little bit banged up, so we'll see if he can play. Osborne was immediately involved at number 2 target with Jefferson. We'll see. There's not a lot to trust in that Dolphins passing game beyond Tyreek Hill, but there's some options maybe to look at there. And I think whenever we see that, Devin Chan has a bigger game when Waddle's out. So that's something to consider. He's going to be out there. So maybe you're down on him after a couple of shaky weeks, but maybe it's time to go there. And Isaiah Pacheco, that clearly leaves Clyde Edwards-Helaire as the lead back, and they have a great matchup against the Bengals. He's one of the best starts here all of a sudden. Go figure, you're playing Clyde Edwards-Helaire potentially in the championship round. So that's the way I think this sums up the season. And watch Brock Purdy, because if he doesn't start, then Sam Darnold is going to get this matchup as well. So something to look at there. They expect Purdy to be fine, but if not, Darnold we know is available in pretty much every league. So you can plug and play him against the Commanders and get probably some good value because of that matchup. So a lot of good stuff. We'll talk about how we rank these guys, if we're going to rank some of these backups here in our next couple shows.
Yeah, we'll do our running backs and quarterbacks on tomorrow's show, wide receiver, tight ends on Thursday, and then Friday we'll always finish it with our favorite flex and sleepers and prize picks of the week.
All right, great, Michelle. Good to set the table. I'm glad we had a little Christmas break here, but more business to be done here in week 17 as we continue Locked On Fantasy Football for Locked On Fantasy Football. This has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.